I want to come back to what you said about some of the stories you've received from alumni.
Right.
And obviously there is the problematic fact of UCT in 76, a white institution, a white tertiary institution, a lot of the staff at UCT sympathetic to the state. Where and what are the stories that you've heard from some of the alumni that have really touched your heart? Or maybe just one?
You know, it's when people started writing to me, because I asked for documentation, or I asked for any photographs, I asked for anything that people had, and people started writing stories to me. Now, I have to say I was not ready. I was not ready for this. And I would just respond to people and say, you know what, this has just made my day. Now I can just focus and put my whole energy into this thing, just because of the stories that you've written to me. So it is some very touching stories that we've had to take in and say, but the question that beyond your question, the question for me is, what am I going to do with all the stories? Because I asked for them.
Now you've got to do something with them.
You know, I asked for them.
Yeah.
And people have been very supportive. And the amazing thing about the stories of 76 is that people are writing them from an earnest heart. People are writing them to me from a point of view that says, these stories are the stories that made us have a different view of what was happening at the time in the country, because we were not aware, you know. For some of the students, for instance, the issue, I think the biggest part was for them in the medical school, because that was where it was quite clear, because they would sit together in class and be lectured, but when it came to practicals, they wouldn't be allowed to be together.
Sure. So it really just is this wealth of kind of history that you're opening up on June 16.
And I'm hoping that, Erin, I'm hoping that I will be able to do a follow-up on this and actually do create some kind of an archive specifically for June 16 at UCT, and looking at stories within UCT of how people and how alumni of UCT were affected. Because right now I'm celebrating different timelines in terms of the 70th anniversary of this, 50th anniversary of this. So as I celebrate the 40th anniversary of June 16, I'm hoping that I can take this as a project on its own, and I hope that I'll be able to get the support of the alumni to make sure that we are able to collate these stories and put them together in some form of book or archive or some kind of resource to be able to say, this is what the role, or this is what UCT contributed, or alumni from UCT contributed to this day in the history of the country.
In South Africa's history. And I think in the wake of what's happened with students in the last year or two, it does have an interesting sort of overlap with 1976 and the dynamics and tensions of some of the student protest and uproar and Shackville and Rhodes Must Fall. It adds to that recipe, and maybe it's a bit of spice and maybe it's a bit of, you know, bitter salt. I don't know. I guess that depends on where in the power structure you stand, but it certainly is an important part of UCT going into 1976 anniversary.
I think starting with Rhodes Must Fall, it is a critical, and to a certain extent, there are some similarities in terms of what was happening in 76 and what happened with Rhodes Must Fall. In the sense that there is a certain element of coming to realization of who we are as a nation. As you rightfully pointed out, around when I mentioned earlier on that leading up to 76, there was a black consciousness movement, which is the movement that was saying, who are we as a nation? You know, and that when people were being forced into one kind of direction, it was quite easy for them because there had been this drive of who are we as a nation. So when they were forced into a particular identity of the Afrikaans situation, they were able to easily stand up because they were starting to realize who they were as a nation. And so the issue of the Rhodes Must Fall movement and the subsequent hashtags are also somehow linked to the issue of identity of who we are as a nation.
So you're taking out that nationalist mantle that the old UCT had and taking it up again, but in a very different political climate.
Oh, yes.
So is it still Moscow on the hill, or is it a different capital now?
You know, the leadership of the people who were tasked with Moscow and the Hill are very angry at the moment with UCT. But it's a misdirected anger in the sense that if they were here, they would realize that it is the same energy, it is the same attitude, it is the same perspective that the students are coming from that they had when they were termed Moscow on the Hill. It's just that the difference right now is that the way those battles are fought seems to be destructive to them in terms of, but it is the same kind of urgency, it's the same perspective that the students are having right now to say, we will not stand for things like this.